Then again, this might just be a little...
We got two straight from toddling to sprinting. So we just finally got through that with my kids, and then we got two little dogs. Sisters from the same litter. Now they've found every hole in the fence. But for a while, every couple of days, it was phone would ring.
Yeah,
I have your dogs.
I'd like to begin the meeting now. If everybody, can I have your attention, please? Just wanted to make sure we had a quorum. We just made it, so maybe some folks will be joining us shortly. But right now, first item on our agenda tonight, I'll review the agenda. We have public comments, and after public comments, we have commissioner comments and responses. And thank you. After that, we're going to review the minutes from September and October, which we had some changes made. Then the policy review on standards of conduct and policy review. Crowd management and control policy. We'll take a break after that. We'll have the chief's presentation. Commission vacancy to deal with, and also professional stops data pilot program update. And so with that having been reviewed, we'll move into public comments.
Okay.
I'll turn the meeting over to Bill.
I have one speaker. If anybody else wants to speak tonight in the public forum, I need you to fill out a blue form. They're right up there. If you can get that to me, that'd be great. And then we'll start out with Jessica C. Screen. You're up, Jessica. And you have 3 minutes to talk, and then I'll let you know when there's 20 seconds left.
Okay. I'm Jessica C. Screen. Two things. First of all, I'd like to ask the chief during his report maybe to give an update on some things regarding the homelessness situation, about the unauthorized camps, and about the flyer that EPD was preparing for the neighbors around the unauthorized camps, and any update on your little advisory group that you were putting together. The second issue is about the Civilian Review Board, and I guess Steve is your liaison with them, and he's not here. I don't know if you're aware that their meetings have not been recorded officially for a number of months now, and the CRB is having some discussion about whether or not to have the meetings recorded again. It used to be the minutes taker would have a recording device there, so that there could be a public records request made, and a person, news reporter, whatever, could get a copy of that tape, I guess. It's the police auditor who had made the decision to stop the recording. And so now it's under discussion whether or not they want to restart them, and possibly recording the parts of the meeting that don't include the case review. But what's under discussion, that they tabled it from their meeting the other night to their next meeting, which is in January. And it looks to me like there's the majority seems to be just fine with not having the meetings recorded. 3 people expressed real concern about not having the meetings recorded. I would like to express, and I think it's in the police commission's interest too, to be concerned about this. We really need that Civilian Review Board to be as transparent and accessible as possible. And even though at this point there's hardly anybody in the audience and hardly anybody had ever requested a recording, we need to be able to provide that if it's requested. And like if the news media, for instance, wasn't there, but they heard that there was something that then they'd want to get, well, if there's no official way for them to get that recording, then our community is kind of at a loss as far as the transparency that's desirable for the interests of trust in the community and the police department. So if there was any way that any of you, or the majority of you, cared enough about that to express something to your absent liaison, I for one would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. And the second person we have tonight is Kelly Ann Stiles. You have 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when you have 20 seconds left.
Thank you. As a parent of a victim of sex trafficking, and my grandson also victimized by these people because the boy's father had attempted many times to kidnap to Mexico and stuff. So I keep trying to get help and told legally there is no way. And Joey Ibarra has tried to kidnap and do a lot of things to us. And I've even tried calling the Eugene police to say, here's my name and number, everything. If anything happens to her, please call me. And I'm told 3 different times that the police is not set up to do that. And I said, I thought if someone was found dead or beaten or hospitalized, that was your job to find the next of kin. And I admit the problem is when one of the sex traffickers found out that I had turned in information to the FBI, and then I overheard some things when I went to deliver her mail that they knew that I might report what I'd heard again. And so they had her call the Springfield police to say that I was harassing her by phone and never speak to her again. And I showed the officer my phone to prove that wasn't the truth. I told him who the FBI agent and the Eugene detective was who had arrested this one of the men. And I said, did you see the condition my daughter was in when she made that report? And he said, no, she called it in, so I didn't see it. So I told him that she was a victim of sex trafficking. She cooperates just enough because they brought a gun to my home and they were going to kill us. And so in her mind, being a person of color, half Indian, and her child's half Hispanic, she thinks she's keeping them alive. And she has regained custody now with the help of my calling out to anyone and everyone that it would listen to me. The senators, Merkel and Wyden, kind of help. But my problem is, I tried to tell them that Joey Ibarra, Cesar Ibarra, Pedro, all of them are still going to try and kidnap them and take them to Mexico. And because she's no longer living with me, she's been really beaten for me reporting things. She's even brainwashed and afraid and hateful to be near me. And I get that. I've joined the Hope Ranch Ministries and Lane County Task Force to try to become more educated, try to help. But I'm frustrated because DHS won't tell me if they're dead or alive and where they are. And I just don't know what to do legally to get someone to tell me if she's okay, to go check on her, or even to get the police to call me if something happens to her. So I'm here to ask you, what would you suggest I do? And the sign says my time is up. So I'm sorry for taking your time. I'm sorry for the tears. But if you've seen what has happened to her, you'd understand. So if you could address that issue, I'd appreciate it. I have to leave in about 35 minutes or so to go to another meeting to try to get help there too. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. That's all I have. Public comment?
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is commissioner comments and responses to what you heard here tonight. So if anybody chooses to respond, right ahead and have a comment you want to make on your own, please do. Marshall.
To Ms. C-Screen, I would encourage you to talk with the police auditor about it. I agree that it certainly is more transparent if there is a recording. Especially if I suspect the subject requests it, might be a stronger case, more compelling case for it. So I would encourage you to talk to him about it. He did mention it when I met with him, just in orientation as an issue that was ongoing. So I know he's thinking a lot about it. But not having been privy to theirs, I'll be glad to talk to the liaison about it, but I don't have a lot of experience with that. Having been a domestic violence prosecutor, ma'am, sometimes you do all you can and just let them know that the door is open. And I know it's very frustrating, but it is very difficult for the police unless there is a complaining witness who has actionable information. So I know it's frustrating not to see results, and certainly keep getting all the help you can. But remember, someday she'll appreciate having the door open.
I know that in her heart she does. I get that. What they've done to her, they've posted how they computerized and things from the saying, please pray for her because she's being really brainwashed by them, so they assume you can do that. But I'm just wondering legally, because last time we was one of her friends who had also called the police on my grandson's father for trying to beat me, said she was working as a cashier at Safeway.
Excuse me, Kelly, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but
I'm sorry.
the meeting is not designed for a back and
I
forth, it's just for
apologize.
comments, and we do have an agenda to move along, and I'm sorry that I had to cut you off on
That's okay.
that.
I'm
Okay.
Thank
Who
you.
would like to go next? Around the table. Bill? Okay.
I just want to thank both our speakers tonight for coming, and I know it's always difficult to come and speak in public, and I appreciate it. And don't ever be sorry to come speak in front of our commission. We're happy to hear what you have to say, so thanks again.
Thank you.
Jesse?
Sorry for missing the last meeting. And in response to Jessica's comments, when they first started videotaping our meetings, I was opposed to it. Actually brought a motion asking that they not do it. When we looked into it, there were actually quite a few viewings on the website of the police commission meetings, and everyone decided we want to keep viewing it. I think it is valuable. I've come around to thinking that it is. Hopefully, we're able to get them recorded.
Thank you, both speakers. Good information to think of, and hopefully, and maybe when it comes to the chief's report, although it's further down the line, I don't know if he has anything that he can add to that. Anything was brought up, but I think that would be good. And I don't, is sex trafficking one of the items we have on our agenda for this year, or I can't remember what our items were.
I don't recall.
Okay. I didn't think it was, but I know it's a hot topic. I know we're getting, where I work, we're looking more and more into it. I mean, as a financial institution, I mean, we have some red flags that we can sometimes spot, but it's not as open and easy as it is in other areas. But we're trying to get more and more involved with, at least on the, we're at least starting the initial steps to formulate how we want to inform the front line to be able to recognize some patterns of something when there's some sex trafficking going on. So we're just in the baby phases, so at least we're taking a step forward that way. But Jessica, thank you. I was kind of surprised also that they didn't record the CRB meetings anymore, but I don't think there's a requirement to do that, so I think it's kind of up to their group whether they do it or not. But I would agree that having a recording is always good to have. I also want to comment, and these are I just want to make sure that these are strictly my comments. I went to the CRB meeting on October 27th, where they had a special review of the Brian Babs incident, and I'm not going to, I don't want to speak for Steve, so I'm not coming on anything from him. These were my observations from that meeting. It was pretty obvious that Mr. Gissner was very disappointed in the IDFIT team and the investigation that was performed. He was very careful in choosing his words in describing what had happened. But I think it was very, very obvious that he was very disappointed, and he has recommended, he had a fairly lengthy report as they went through the whole investigation and what they had found, and he came up with a lot of recommendations at the end, some of which I know the chief has already put into place and is looking at some of the others already. They came up with a number of policy recommendations that I know that they were going to meet, and as I spoke with Leah earlier before our meeting, it sounds like they've already started that process in the meeting a couple of days ago to how they want to bring those forward to the police commission, because there were a number of policy changes they were recommending as far as how the IFIT team is put together to investigate whenever there's a shooting or an incident like that. It wasn't as well attended as I had expected it to be. I know that the chief was there, and a number of I think the Bad family was there too. Media covered it pretty well too, but I just kind of wanted to report on that to let you know some of the things that come out of that and some of my observations there. And if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. I'll let. I know Carter's not here, or we have a different look for Carter tonight. But Leah gave me her card. They have the PowerPoint presentation that was presented at the meeting that had went down basically step by step of how the case was investigated and.
Sorry, Vicki let me know it's on our website also.
It's on your website too? Okay. But I also wanted to say that he was very complimentary of Eugene Police Department. They handled it very, very well. He was very complimentary of the chief and the whole department. His whole dissatisfaction was with the way that the team handled it, and which is the group that comes together from all the different departments and jurisdictions that help out. Whether it's the sheriff, state police, it's made up of. I think most of us have looked at that in the past. He's very complimentary of how EPD handled it. They did what they had to do, and I wanted to thank also the chief for his progressiveness and starting to make the changes already without having to wait for a lot of us to input or to get a lot of input from other people. He's already seen the changes that some of the changes that he to make. So I want to thank you on that, and I want to thank the CRB and even Internal Affairs for going through a very, very thorough investigation. I know Mr. Gisner seemed to be very impressed with EPD and the investigation that they went through. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Well, I guess, yeah, I'll start with this. I got a call from Bob Walker saying that a complaint to be kept anonymous had been raised concerning my comments about the students who were, shall we say, injured at MIT. Over the phone, I agreed to apologize. After further thought, the answer is no, I will not. And these are essentially, this was short enough to read into the record, but I think I'll just do it as a, hand it out to you. And here's some more copies if anyone's interested. Let me read from concerning these students. This is the tech from the day after that happened. The date was May 11th, 1972, and this is from this article. And this only talks about the early part of the action on the campus, but it says the serious injuries included a broken arm, head injuries with lacerations and broken teeth, and 2 back injuries, the later caused by tear gas canisters fired directly at students. The head injuries were the result of a prolonged beating and kicking by riot police of a student who had reportedly attempted to hurl a burning tear gas canister back at the police. There were also reports of at least 3 dog bites inflicted by police canine corps. I think, to be honest, given what I witnessed on campus, that's severely underreported. So that's my response to that, and we go from there.
Anybody else?
If there are any other comments, I'll just respond to Jessica, if that's all right. There was a homeless camp with about 40 to 50 tents at 5th and anybody know, any of you, Kyle or Matt, know better than have the details at 1st and Bailey Hill, 5th and Bailey Hill? 5th and Bailey Hill. Okay. And we've been communicating, our liaisons have been communicating with them for some time. Looks like about half the camp moved a couple of days ago. I don't remember the new location. You remember where it is?
I haven't heard from anyone.
Okay. And the other half stayed there. They're two different organizations. And so we'll continue to negotiate them. And then the flyers are still being edited. I don't know what their status is right now. And no new progress on the advisory group.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to have to respond to this because it was brought to my attention after the last meeting that a racial slur was made by one of our members in the commission. Joe's comments, I went back and reviewed the tape after I got the complaint, and it stated that certain persons in a group, the Hillel Student Union, were described by him as the fat girls and the skinny guys that wear beanies. So somebody took exception to that and felt it was a ethnic slur. I didn't hear it myself, so I didn't know, but I did review the tape, and I think, knowing Joe, I know he didn't mean it in that way. I certainly told him that, and I believe he didn't. But tonight, after the response, and I read a paragraph here that further insults Judaism, that's responses to further insult a whole group of people about their religion. I don't think that's a proper display of what I want to say, restraint by a commissioner on this commission, and I'll have to see what other actions are available. If the commission wants to weigh in on this, this is fine. That's what this is for. We have to air our laundry in public, because we are a commission. And when people feel aggrieved, it's necessary for us to respond. So if anybody has anything they'd like to say, we should say it now in open meeting. I've said my part.
Only that, Joe, you put me in an awful situation, but I think you put a lot of other people in a much worse situation with your words here. The problem you create for me is I have to take this back to the Human Rights Commission as part of the public record.
Okay.
I've worked very hard for 2 years to build bridges between that commission and this one. This doesn't make my job easier. And that's just being selfish. When I look at the larger picture, there's stuff in here that is disgusting. I'm sorry.
Bill?
Yeah, I don't understand the purpose of why this had to be written and handed out today. This is not what the police commission is about. It's not what we, and as a commissioner representing himself like this, is just not in good form. And I think that Bob and I need to look into what else we can look at, have this, because these kind of things don't belong here and shouldn't be in a public forum. And Edward's right. This is something that just doesn't belong. It makes everybody's job harder.
Marsh?
I guess I'd just like to commend the police for their appropriate actions in intervening in the situation at the Jewish, I believe it was a fraternity, but
Yes.
Don't quote me if I'm wrong, this week, in terms of the intimidation incident. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Second that.
Okay. Everybody weighed in? I just wanted to add that I did not ask Joe for an apology. I asked him what he thought we should do about this complaint. And it was Joe's suggestion that he apologize. So I'm surprised by this, taken by surprise. I'll need some time to think about it, as Bill said, and take action appropriately. Any other comments from commissioners? If not, we'll move on to the next review of the minutes. And I'm sorry I did not introduce you at the beginning. James Hadley is with us tonight because Carter couldn't make it. So James, thank you.
Was that clap because he's here?
We're here.
We're telling.
Hey, do you mind if we take a minute for James to give you his bio? little background.
Certainly.
You mind doing that, James?
Yeah.
Not at all. So I come from a higher education background. I worked at Northwest Christian University for 6 years as the assistant director for financial aid. I specialize in policy and reconciliation. I have a degree in accounting, business administration. I came here because my thesis work is heavily built on predictive modeling and student fit in higher education to increase retention rates. The thought was that that could be paralleled somewhat for predictive policing. So that's kind of where that fits in. I've been with EPD for 2.5 years in the crime analysis unit. I'm currently acting in the capacity of supervisor through the new year, and I'm covering for Carter tonight.
Quick question. That makes you Jeremy's supervisor?
Yes.
Does anyone else here have something that they want to say about the work Jeremy did while he was here? Because I gave him an A+ when I was speaking to him earlier.
Yeah. I don't know what he does, you know, everything that he's doing for you, but he did great work for us, so
So this is our moment to speak
Yeah,
about
I
it.
would second that.
Yeah.
I will forward that on.
And welcome.
Well, so you can guide us through the minutes, I guess, but you folks have the minutes in front of you, so I hope you've got time to look them over and see if you have any corrections. Edward? Yeah.
Just about my instant promotion to vice chair of this commission.
Oh, I see that, yeah.
I think there's a comment in the wrong place there, perhaps.
Edward has listed his.
yes. I missed that.
I really don't want the responsibility, guys.
Well, okay. Any other corrections? If not, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes as presented with one correction.
So moved.
Second.
By Joe, seconded by Edward. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
And I, as to the minutes I was here for in October, not September.
Okay, that's fine. We understand that we're,
So we were,
Okay.
so we were
Vice
covering,
versa.
we were covering both sets of minutes in that?
Yeah.
No, okay.
okay.
Just want
So,
to make sure.
we head to the next item on our agenda, which is the standards of duties and conduct policy. So, Jeff, come up here and join us at the table.
Before I answer your questions about this policy, I wanted to introduce Sergeant Williams real briefly. I'm doing it this week and month because he won't be here for the last one. But Sergeant Williams is my replacement. I guess yes, but I will be rotating back to patrol. So Sergeant Williams will be taking over. He's here to just kind of observe today. He'll spend some time with me in the month, in this month or part of next month, understanding the role. We'll sit down with Ms. Carter. We'll go over the police commission component of it, the accreditation. There's a couple other hats I wear for the department in addition to the liaison and policy work here. So Kyle's going to learn all that. I've known Kyle. He and I went to the academy together about 11 or 12 years ago, and I think he's going to be a great fit for you guys. He's real responsible and probably way more organized than I am, so I think he's going to be a benefit to y'all. So there he is. And I bet you can meet him at the break and get more of the story. So duty standards and conduct is it's just that. It's a replacement for, we're bringing one of our old general orders up to speed. We've done a pretty exhaustive review of it, and we've, in the last couple of years since we've had the auditor and since we've started using Blue Team and IA Pro, we've identified the need to bring this up into kind of current language. And we've added in the front, the purpose and scope. We've also added some of our philosophy and values to it. It's an important document to keep police on track, to know, what we're supposed to do, not supposed to do, and what can result in discipline. But it's also, like a lot of these policies, it's a contract with the community, and more so now than ever, I think the community has, well, we've seen it, exceedingly higher standard for police departments than maybe they have historically, or at least they're more vocal about that expectation. It may not have changed, but it's certainly more present. So we've tried to establish that contract with the community as well. I'm happy to answer any of your questions. There's a couple of, you probably didn't review our old code of conduct or had the opportunity to. Some of this is consistent and maybe just reworked a little bit. And then some of it, not through intentional omissions, we just maybe hadn't encountered some of those problems. We didn't have some of the bulletized components, such as a duty to know and enforce laws or identify yourself as a police officer. We beefed up insubordination, and I'll admit some of this is taken directly out of our code of conduct. Some of this is pilfered from other agencies who have real comprehensive code of conduct policies, and some of it was just my best effort at wordsmithing. So if you see maybe some areas that aren't as clear or could be firmed up or explained better, I'd be willing to bet that's probably one of my areas, and I'm happy to make those changes. We also added at the end the expectations of supervisors, because in addition to knowing and understanding the rules, so to speak, there's an extra supervisory responsibility that we think should be codified for our supervisors, our sergeants, patrol sergeants.
Two.
Yes, sir.
These are entirely stylistic.
Yeah.
In where did I lost it already? Professionalism section. You refer in the second person. You. A small group will choose your work. I would just, for consistency's sake, phrase it in the third person. The police, the Eugene police.
Yes.
And then, this is as far as I got. Conduct, engaging in sexual relations, but not limited to sexual intercourse or other sexual contact while on duty. I think you might want to say engaging in sexual relations while on duty, including but not limited to. As far as I know, under the conduct section. I don't think about chastity is necessarily required for the police service, but you might want to just rephrase it for clarity's sake. Sorry.
Yeah, that brings it kind of all-inclusive there, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely want to have that there.
Yeah.
Might want to rephrase it. That was all
I've got Bill, then Edward, then Jim.
For the most part, I like the policy, like you put in it. The only thing that I think might need to be worked out a little bit is more of kind of the tone of it about that the job here to really to help or to protect. I guess what I'm looking for is like we talked about that our police department is more about trying to work through and de-escalate issues and do that. And I guess I didn't see that, especially like in the philosophy and values about we're here to really serve the citizens or work through the citizens. I mean, there's a little piece in there, but I don't know. It's more of that. I think because that's important. I think that's one of the department's strength is that's where that they look at how to handle problems and how to do that. It's more of does that make sense?
Like,
Sergeant?
but, let me restate, like underscoring our, are you talking about conflict resolution or within the community, engaging the community to?
Yeah, those
So-
things, that's what I guess I was sort of missing in
Okay.
that front piece of this, is that, what really is the philosophy of handling, of working with the community, doing that.
Do you have any language?
No, I don't, that's what I'm struggling with, it's just more of a tone kind
Okay.
of thing.
I'm in a great mood. I'm in a
We are too.
We're in a great mood.
There, see? I can hear us cheering.
Where's James?
He's still having trouble shutting.
I don't know if I made that clear enough for you, Sergeant.
No,
but
we could
it's
probably
sort of
maybe
a-
talk at a break
Yeah.
or even offline.
Okay.
I probably understand where you're trying to go with it. We're trying to confine this to, when we're talking about engaging the community about, like, problem solving. Well, I guess maybe we should talk offline because I want to make this inclusive, but at the same time,
And I'll try to
yeah.
think through that a little better, and try to be able to explain to you a little better.
Okay.
Okay, maybe we could get some language proposed. Bill, Edward, Jim, Joe, and Scott. I'm sorry, Edward.
Okay, so you're gonna go again, Bill?
Yeah, no,
Bill's going twice.
I'm just getting us confused because we're both vice chairs.
That's right.
Does EPD use the term CUBO, conduct on becoming an officer?
No.
Slang in other departments.
Right.
So in essence, this is the...
Right.
Got it. Conduct on becoming an officer is everything in some departments from you just made the uniform look bad to, oh my Lord. That's all I had. That was it.
Jim?
I thought it was, I didn't catch the third-party reference. But, there might be some other U's in there too. That you-
I'm sure there are.
So,
I'm just recalling.
But I thought it was very, very well written, especially knowing that, I was pretty sure you had pulled in different sources of information to put this together, as you normally do. And it's what?
It's a Frankenpal's.
Yeah, but I thought it was a very, very well put together, and I know you can't, there's no way you can cover everything that could possibly happen, but I thought you did a pretty good job of hitting the major points of, these are the bad things, and definitely, but also including verbiage and all the way through, that these are not the only ones.
Right.
But, to make sure that, you kind of need to be on the up and up, and that's what people are expecting you to be. So I thought it was very well written, and it's definitely long and comprehensive.
Yeah.
So I was pretty impressed with it. Thank you.
Well, I should add that one of our city attorneys specializes in labor, bargaining and discipline and due process, all those sorts of things. And that specific attorney has reviewed this and made some pretty significant, not significant, but there was some red ink in just about every one of these sections. So you can review it with the confidence that it's been reviewed by one of our city attorneys who also happens to specialize in just this very thing.
Okay, Jim, you're done? Go.
Let's see, section 101-417, on political activity. It struck me that maybe it would be useful to insert what it is that they can do. In other words, what you're saying is that they can't get engaged in a political activity identifying themselves as a police officer. But the thing is, are they permitted, for example, to engage in political activity, as a private citizen where the police department is in no way mentioned?
Well, it's interesting. There's a whole host, and I bet the chief can probably speak even better to this, but there is there are court cases handed down where even, and it's specific to me as a citizen talking about something that would be a component of my job or assignment, that not all the free speech protections are afforded to me, even as a not wearing a blue suit civilian, if it has any sort of nexus to do with my employment or expectations of me in my job. So there's this whole really complex body of work and case law that would point to, well, in some instances the answer is no, you can't do anything about it. The best guidance we could probably give our officers is to simply remain neutral, or not engage in any sort of political activity, even if it was sanctioned or allowable. I can't think of the example where it would be, but it's probably the most prudent advice to stay away from it, sir.
You were given.
Yeah, there's a statute that forbids public officials from in using their position to encourage anybody to take a position on something that's going to be on the ballot. So basically, if it's going to be on the ballot, or if it's a political committee, like a committee to re-elect the president or something like that, just use an example, then that would be against the law. But we can go up to Salem and lobby bills, House and Senate bills, and we do.
But I guess the phrase in what you said was using their position. So in the case of they're not using their position, is it necessary to restrict officers from getting involved in causes they believe in?
No.
So what I'm suggesting is that it might be useful in some way to describe how people, because if you read this, maybe you get run to the conclusion that I can't do anything. I'm completely restricted. And that seems unfair and unnecessary, and maybe some language indicating how they might be able to engage while not violating the appropriate principles might be useful.
Joe and Scott, and Jesse, and then Jim again. Or Scott, yeah, Scott, you're next. I'm staying behind the queue.
Oh, great, thanks. I was actually thinking about our report that we had on the President's 21st Century Policing and some of the philosophy there. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Bill, but I was kind of thinking the same thing. I think, first of all, it's well written, but I think in that philosophy area, maybe we could just think of some of those topics we covered there and how that could be incorporated. I was really impressed with that conversation and how that could change the interactions between people on the street and our officers. So I don't know if that lent any to what you were looking at or not.
No, that's sort of what I'm trying to get across. He's a much better speaker.
Jesse, and then Jim.
Yeah, it reads well. It's got a lot of good stuff. It's hard to guess or know what's missing from a policy like this. You want honesty, integrity, don't steal, don't lie or cheat. Hopefully the CRB representative runs this by the CRB, and the police auditor can look at it for input, because they're the people like where we specifically don't look at officer misconduct. The CRB looks at potential cases of officer misconduct, so they might have like an idea of that one thing that really ought to be mentioned. And as far as political activity, that one's really tough for any government employee. I hate to suggest having one particular section, because one particular section that says ask your supervisor or ask some specific legal representative of the department if you have questions. Like, if you feel like joining a political party, can you do that? It's going to be hard to address all those specific things because people ought to be able to ask questions about anything. So I hesitate to suggest that, but I'm just throwing that idea out there.
Thank you. So Jim, back up.
I guess I'm going to hit the political activity too. And maybe it's more, just for, now that it's been brought up, it's raised some questions for me, just as more of a, probably more of a clarification. Is this limited to just on duty, or is it off duty also? I know there's some parts about wearing their uniform off that look like it's kind of off duty, or their badge, or.
Well, specifically political activity, I think, would be restricted to when the officer is as a representative of the department. If I wanted to go to a political rally on my own time and not purport to be endorsing or bringing with me the endorsement of the police department or anything in that vein, that's perfectly acceptable.
So he was Matt Lowen.
Yeah, Matt Lowen. I'll go to a political rally as me because I believe in that cause.
That's what I wanted to try to make sure I was understanding that.
Yeah.
So, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it seems to me that when I read ballots and I read the descriptions of the different measures that are out there, and they'll have like Oregon chiefs of police are supporting this, isn't that support? I mean, doesn't that in violation of this, because that's, or maybe
it's a lobbying group. I mean, it's an association. Yeah.
And I guess I haven't read whether it says Chief Kearns, supports this, and so that makes it sound like it's in his. He's acting as his position, and I don't know if you ever have. I'm sorry, but if it says,
I've never broken this law.
Okay. And maybe I haven't looked at. I've read those thoroughly as who's supporting, which side on a measure or something to see whether it has. As an example, like in Eugene Police Department, Chief Kearns supports this. So in that situation, he might say he might be one of the people listed as supporting it, but probably having his name listed as Chief Kearns or something would be.
I think if he was going to put his name to it, he'd probably have the city attorney review whether or not that was.
The city attorney would be with me. Put my name.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't say like Sergeant Matt Lowen is Sergeant, correct?
I am correct. I'm a sergeant. Yes.
Sergeant Matt Lowen supports this, because then you might be. Okay.
I would be engaging in political activities on duty.
Not on duty. I'm talking, or if you sign something and it shows on a petition that everybody's, like the pamphlets that come out that show here's who supports the measure, here's who doesn't, and has your name on there with you as a sergeant.
I would probably see. Well, this is.
And maybe I'm splitting hairs here, but to me that shows that you're representing your position, supporting something, and is that in violation of this?
I would suggest that it is. I mean,
It has to be. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be in violation of the law.
Okay, and I'm not saying that I've seen that, but that's what I was just trying to get like a clarification on what this meant. Okay, that works for me. Thank you.
So I had inserted myself in before Marshall, Edward, and now Joe. So I just want to weigh in on the political aspect of it. I think what we've got here
It's the season.
is we have many associations that endorse political candidates. Not so much here, I don't see it as often, but back east, it was a major issue for the police unions to support a candidate for obvious reasons, whether it be governor, lieutenant governor, representative, whatever that they felt might be a benefit to them in that office. So it was done all the time, and a group is not a person. You're not saying Sergeant Lowen is supporting, this candidate. You're saying the association is supporting the candidate, and therefore not everybody is nobody, I guess. Anyways, the point, this is not any different from what I've seen in many other departments. It's pretty much the same. if in any way, I mean, we had people that were wearing buttons for certain presidential candidates once, and that knocked them out because they were just like, you can't do that. It's on your uniform. I mean, you can't do it on duty. You can't campaign on duty. You can't say that I'm a police officer and I'm supporting so-and-so for office. It just can't be done. In fact, one group did support governors in Virginia, and they had to hire a security guard in a uniform to say the police support this governor. He wasn't even a police officer because they had to. So I'm just saying, I think this paragraph pretty much covers everything that you can't do, and everything else is okay. Am I right? Am I getting that right? Okay.
Thank you for your
All right.
there, Bob.
Good. Now next is Marshall, then Edward, then Joe.
On the political stuff, I'll just ask the chief. You might want to check and see if you have Hatch Act employees. Employees that are funded directly by federal grants are covered by the Hatch Act, which has some additional restrictions. So it's, I don't know that you need to write policy, but if you do, then they have to be briefed on. You can't make a political contribution even if you're a Hatch Act employee. I've been one. So that's
How do you spell that?
just like Hatch and Egg, H-A-T-C-H. It just depends on how their position is funded. And you may not have any. I'm just bringing it up. You can ask the city attorney.
Okay.
The other one I had was actually, let me get to the right one, in 1001.4.3. The substance on A and B is fine, but it says associations with felons / indicted persons. That's not exactly what the policy says. I would probably reword that to people involved in ongoing criminal activity, and that's probably a little clearer. Because, I mean, if I'm a police officer, my wife's a doctor, she's under indictment for Medicaid fraud. I mean, there are situations that come up. It's not, if you're aware of ongoing criminal activity in your officer, clearly you shouldn't associate with that person, but being under indictment is not the same as...
Right.
That goes with the sexual relations later on.
That's right.
Right.
Just, again, a wording thing.
Okay, Edward.
Just take into account that you got this from different policies.
Yeah.
You managed to come down on horseplay doubly hard.
Yeah, we did.
It has its own section, 1001.4.12, and it is A under 1001.4.6.
Yeah.
So you really don't like the horseplay.
No, we do not. No, that's a typo.
Yeah.
But it was dueling horseplay verbiage for me and the assistant chief. I have one that I need to strike. I like his better, of course, because I'm better. Right. So that's a typo.
Okay.
That's my error.
Which one's the typos?
Let me look at them both, and I'll tell you which one's the assistant chiefs, and I like that one. His is the one that has its own section.
Mm-hmm.
So my A needs to be struck from conduct. I'm sorry.
That's all I had.
Good catch.
Okay, Joe.
Yeah, back into the political thing. I guess the distinction is the question of Matt Lowen wearing his uniform versus Matt Lowen wearing a T-shirt and jeans. What are the things that are allowed for Matt Lowen wearing a T-shirt and jeans?
That's such a complicated answer that I know that if I attempted to answer it, I would get it wrong. I can give you an example, and I hope I'm not talking out of turn. It happened a long time ago, and the person who works here isn't an employee here anymore. But there was a department employee who had a very strong public opinion about a certain city ordinance, and that person used their own personal time and basically not protested but offered his or her opinion about that specific measure. And because they were a public employee and there was a nexus between reporting between his job and what he or she was airing information about in public. I wasn't privy to all the facts, but in the end, that person was pulled aside and told you can't do that. What you're doing is not allowed. And I know the chief could probably firm up what I'm going after this. But in the course of my experience, I've seen several of these cases where public employees aren't offered all the same free speech protections that a regular citizen is, particularly when it has to do with things that kind of occur within my regular job duties. So I still think the best advice to give to an employee is don't do it at all, and make darn good and sure that you are completely out of the even perception that you are using your authority or position to influence anything that has to do with politics or elected matters. Sir, you probably know what I'm referring to, but I don't know if you could firm up my answer any better.
No.
Or not. Or I'm completely like I'm crazy.
No, you nailed it, but.
Okay.
The short answer is I don't know how to completely answer that one.
Okay. Joe? You finished?
Yeah, if there's some way, in other words, this sort of takes a lot away from the individual, this particular language as I look at it here. And maybe if there's a way to find, to sort of give a little bit of that back, in certain circumstances, maybe that would be good. It just seems like you're removing a lot of what it is to be, an American. And I can see lots of cases where, yeah, there's going to be a conflict, but there's other cases where there won't. And so, is there a way to have the officers have a little more freedom, or at least to define, what a boundary is for that? So that's just my thought. And thank you for the answer.
This is obviously a hot topic. I'll take it back to the Huago is the city attorney who does a lot of this review, and ask if I'll kind of frame in the conversation for her. Maybe she can help us, offer some different language or something.
I had myself the cue last until nobody else was putting together, so
I have a couple
all
of
right.
questions.
Two things. One, under the dealing with notorious and felonious people section, it does say unless circumstances, I think the language is something about circumstances.
Unavoidable
circumstances. And I hope that would be family members. Many times family members are.
That's kind of what I imagine when I read that.
Okay.
Is that
I didn't see it specifically mentioned. A lot of departments use that language. This excludes family members because you can't control what,
you still have to pick up and drop off kids.
what they do, and that kind of thing. And the second thing was about conduct of officers in an off-duty situation. A lot of departments, I don't know about Eugene, but they when they hire their officers, they tell them they're on duty 24 hours a day. That really are required to take action when they see a felony being committed in front of. I don't know what Eugene does, as I said, but I think what happens here is this job is more, not just a 9-to-5 job. This job is about your life and your lifestyle and keeping above reproach and not jumping in the fray politically where other people who know you to be a police officer. Doesn't mean that if you don't say you are. Some people even say by saying the fact that I'm not representing the police department when I say this. Well, now you've let everybody know you are on the police department, so you actually, in a backhanded way, kind of said, yeah, I'm talking as a cop now. So I think you have to err on the side of being abundantly cautious when you deal with things you do off duty as a police officer compared to other jobs. I mean, if you're a dentist or a doctor or a lawyer, you go out and say whatever you want. That's, you know, people don't agree with you, then they don't come to see you in your practice. But I think that as a police officer, you always have to remain above and seem impartial to everyone out there that you work when you go on a job. So being off duty and representing a position that people who know you and know you're a police officer would affect their feeling about whether or not you can do your job even-handedly. So I think it's important to keep that section, from my perspective, just weighing in. Okay? Anybody else?
I've got a couple things.
Oh, right, you were saying that. So.
In point 2,
Yes, sir.
that paragraph has the word citizens in it. And not
Oh,
everybody
right,
lives
community
here as a
members?
citizen. Yeah, it could be that, or
Where I see it.
exceed that of civilians, maybe. Just something to
Community
make sure we're keeping
Yes,
an eye
sir.
on. It's easy to
Consistent.
overlook
Don't use
that.
We use community members.
Takes off this. And then in point 4.6, subparagraph I, it's the last one, the use of profane language. This only limits the use of profane language if it's insulting or demeaning to somebody. And that's a little narrower than I would like it to be.
Just while performing.
Yeah, I don't know, I like the language we have now, but I'd be happy to look at something else. And then on point 4.20, truthfulness. I think it would be good for the police commission to see some examples of this policy from a variety of policy manuals. This one has the word negligently in there, and I don't know how you, our current policy has that, and it always bothered me because I don't know how you negligently can be dishonest. You know, people, this says negligently misrepresenting things. And if someone thinks the car is maroon and really it's red, have they been negligent about something? Or they think they showed up for work at 8 and really it was 8:03, have they been negligent? That worries me a lot because of how much is at stake with that truthfulness allegation.
So that's maybe not strike negligently, but rethink it and bring back some other examples of truthfulness statements from other agencies to the commission.
Yeah, if you got a few examples.
Oh, I find plenty.
Would the language neglecting to mention facts be more correct? I mean, they call that lies of omission, right?
And that's kind of covered in the second section where you refusing to truthfully or completely answer, so withholding information,
withholding,
not
okay.
answering
Okay.
completely.
Sorry.
No, there's a lot in there.
But you put a lot of good stuff together, Matt.
Okay, thanks.
That's really good.
Is that it? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next. Standards. Joe?
Do we want to approve this thing? I mean, I think, there's been a discussion, and he's sort of got good direction.
For making changes to it? Did you want to make some changes to it based on the discussion, or?
Oh, I have notes to make some changes
Yeah.
and to go back and.
Do you want to come back with the changes and have us vote on it then?
I think that's probably
Yeah.
most appropriate.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and wait till he makes the changes, and we'll bring it back at the next, on the next
Yeah.
agenda. Okay, so the next item is the crowd management policy 404.
So this is the fine tuning after I think we only talked about this for 1 month, or one meeting, or 2 meetings prior to this. Okay, so this is some of the fine tuning, that's right. I can call your attention to it easily because I left it in this text edit format so you could see what was changed. But there was an understandable concern about the term being punished, where, and I think the police department has the same thing. We don't punish people, we enforce the laws. So we changed that to legal consequence. You kind of sent me back to the drawing board on the passively blocking vehicular traffic. So what we really wanted to get across is simply that we're not going to have the same delays that we would have to slowly and calmly remove people who were peacefully protesting because we have a legitimate kind of public safety emergency here. So the verbiage I use there is just my best effort to get that, what I felt like your points were across. And then we didn't call them armored police vehicles. We changed the title to police rescue vehicles, which is what we call it. It's painted on the side of them too, so that's totally appropriate. And I think those were all the kind of fine-tuning changes that you'd asked me to make.
Right. Okay. Comments? Questions? Joe?
Okay. Yeah, under, when you, in 404.5, the words that you replace that with, I think, are a major improvement. I don't know that you need to add the word passively. I think if it's just blocking vehicle or traffic lanes, whether they're actively or passively doing it, I think you need to clear it because there is a public concern.
Yeah.
So I would suggest striking that word, passively. The one thing that I guess, as I thought about this over the past month, is that at the beginning there's a lot of stuff about being reasonable and de-escalating and doing all those other aspects. But when you get to the point of actions, it might be good to, insert that all of this other stuff should be should occur first. In other words, you get to 404.7.4 and it says use of force for dispersal methods, approved dispersal methods. Well, what it does is it I kind of get this little feeling that there might be a tendency to go directly to this rather than doing the other things first. And if there's some way maybe to move A down to B and all the rest of them and insert something, again, it would be in all of these sections right here, of, attempting to do this without a show of force. Because the sense that I get is that if you do a show of force, some people are going to back off. Others are going to take that as a challenge, and you're going to get a response. And so at that point, what you've actually done is incited people who might not otherwise have become violent. So I think what's happening here, and it still seems to be in this, is that there's an aspect of provocation that maybe could be toned down, and that's. I think it's still here. That was the thing that bothered me last time, and I still feel it in this.
Anybody else? Chip?
I kind of see where Joe's going, but I think the first part of 407.4 mentions it pretty much looks like this is to the point where they have to do something. And it seems that A through E is the escalation. You're starting with not touching anybody at first, and then you start moving down to, you're starting to maneuver people, which is where you're starting to use a little more force, and then you're going into arresting people, which is even more force, and that's kind of the escalation as you go, but this is after everything else has been tried, after they've been given the warnings, and so I'm okay with the way, I think, with the way it reads.
And policy manuals should reflect guidelines about not procedural manuals. So I understand what Mr. Tyndall is saying, and we don't want it to sound like a confrontational document, but it wouldn't be, nobody would read no police employee should read the policy and use it as a kind of like a checklist. So we wouldn't, but we do at some point need to talk about those certain situations when warnings haven't been heeded. What are the acceptable methods to dispersing the crowd? And while I certainly understand how this policy can read like chronologically, since we go from like philosophy to civil disobedience, then into civil disturbance, into how you get rid of civil disturbance, there's this like kind of progression type format, but we're not intending it to be used in that way. But police sergeants and watch commanders and officers will eventually find themselves in a place where we do have to disperse this crowd. And we don't want it to sound or be confrontational beyond the idea that we're here and we're giving you lawful orders and this is your time to listen, but not be demonstrative about it.
Thank you, Bill. Edward?
Just two things. Thanks for changing the police rescue vehicle. Appreciate that. And then kind of just a question about one of Joe's comments about the passively blocking. And this, because we're just talking about civil disobedience, when we go through the definitions on the private page. So would passively versus actively change this from civil disobedience to civil disturbance?
No.
Okay.
And the whole reason that this was called out specifically is because you can imagine the uproar. I mean, we sort of had it here at the table. You know, people were like, well, why in the heck would you start yanking people out of the street if they're just sitting there? We could sit and block traffic and not say anything and look very peaceful and very calm and rational, and then the police start yarding us out of the roadway. But we all agree when we take a second look at it that there's a real specific reason why that's a danger to the public. And I included the word passively, probably not consciously, but in my head for that reason, that you can have a very peaceful, organized, and calm, non-confrontational group of people actually causing a pretty significant disruption to the city's operation. Like, you know, we were talking about the example of just a sit-in of 300 people on the Ferry Street Bridge. That's a huge problem. That could turn into a huge life safety emergency, and it's not a guarantee to happen every time, but it certainly could. So I think everyone's right in this situation. We could take passively out, because I don't know how you actively block versus passively block. I did kind of write that, kind of like, that's silly, because we're doing jumping jacks and blocking traffic, or we're sitting down blocking traffic. We're still blocking traffic. So it's noted. I don't think it's important. I think it was included in there so we can conjure in our mind the idea that people doing this peaceful sit-in type look can still be doing something that warrants an immediate response. Whereas if they were doing it inside the governor's office, just sitting in the lobby doing the same thing, we wouldn't just rush in there and start ripping people out.
I guess that was sort of where my question was going. Is it, in this, somebody reading that, is there a distinction between, because I mean, it's sort of like passively, because it does remind us that even though they're not doing anything to, other than sitting, we still have to remove them versus if they're just, again, I just want to make sure there wasn't a difference. Okay.
Okay, Edward?
I'm just looking at the public looking at this policy as a few members of the public will. In particular, getting people out of the roadway. Yes, it's a public safety emergency, but I think a lot of people don't understand why. I would suggest that we just add the phrase, particularly with regard to emergency vehicle access. Because that's what people don't get, is there might be an ambulance on the other side of the Ferry Street Bridge trying to get to Sacred Heart. These people sitting in the middle of the bridge is not happening. So I think most people can comprehend, even someone sitting in the middle of the street, the ambulances have to get through. So putting that in there in so many words, I think, would be an improvement. As far as this policy seeming to start right off with shows of force and confrontations and so on, I don't honestly see that. I see that it's put that way in order on the page, but as you say, this isn't a timeline. or a checklist. And under crowd dispersal, it starts right off with, if feasible, establish contact with crowd leaders and develop a mutually acceptable plan for de-escalation and crowd dispersal. So it does not start with a show of force. It starts with that, reaching out to, how do we all get through this without anybody getting their heads cracked? So that's a great place to start, and I don't think that the policy is deficient in any way in that regard. That's all I got.
Thank you, Edward. I have myself, Jesse, and Joe. I understand where you're coming from. Passive resistance is the term. People sit down in the street, so that's where that was coming from, but I have no objection with changing that if we need to. But I think overall the policy, and I've read it several times now with the few changes you've made, is an example of how we can set up a system that allows command to make the decisions that they need to make within these parameters. I think what we need to remember as commissioners is that people have had months and years sometimes of training in how to handle situations like this, and we have to trust those people to try to get it right. And so with that, I think we got to go ahead and approve the policy. I'm going to move that we approve the policy as presented tonight, and you all will still have a chance to speak on the motion. So I have a second to the motion. Marshall is seconded. The next person in the queue would be Jesse, then Joe. If anybody else wants to, Edward.
Sorry if I'm late in asking this, but when are the use of police batons to force crowd management okay?
Like a specific situation?
Yeah.
I mean, well, we're trained in their use to use them as an instrument to keep distance between us. It can be a weapon.
So keeping distance is defensive use rather than offensive use.
Yeah, right. Get back, or it can be used if there are field force techniques that can be employed to move a group of people from an area that they're refusing to leave. We're trying to unblock the sidewalk, or excuse me, a city street, for example, and people won't move. It's kind of this standoff. There are field force techniques that use short but coordinated movements to basically impose on whoever's not moving, and then use the baton as a tool to move those people back. That's my training, and not experience in those techniques, but training in those techniques. You can use it as a leverage tool to remove if somebody's being arrested, there's a probable cause for their arrest, but they're on their stomach and won't put their hands out. You can use that as a tool to leverage their hand out from under their body. But it's primarily a defensive weapon.
I'm thinking, because Bob mentioned passive resistance, and the resisting arrest statute mentions passive resistance is not resisting arrest, and to me, by extension, it shouldn't warrant any use of force. I think to some extent we just got to take on faith that it's going to work out and not be used. They're not going to be used offensively.
Yeah, I mean, we have this understanding of the use of force, what's appropriate and what's not. I mean, I can give you. I would just be making up examples of when we would use it or when we wouldn't. I don't know if you're interested in that. I'll do it offline. I can talk maybe more about it, but I don't feel like I've answered your question fully. But
that's all right.
Okay.
I can jump in.
Oh, sir.
The use of force policy still applies, and we have a policy on the use of police baton, which applies in all circumstances.
Okay.
Okay, next on the list is Joe, Edward, and Scott.
Okay. This gentleman is John Pike. Does anybody remember him?
Got a great haircut.
Yeah. How about this picture? Okay. Maybe pass it around. This was from University of California at
Berkeley?
no, not Santa Cruz, Sacramento, or Davis, I'm sorry, Davis, where John Pike, these are people sitting on a plaza, came by and pepper sprayed everyone at short distance. It's a similar experience to my experience at MIT with the police coming on and seriously injuring a lot of people. Now, I also will raise one more issue, which is, if you remember the incident with George Polling, the person who rang the doorbell at that little protest is a guy named Art Bowman. And he is on videotape saying, I am not resisting arrest. Why are you inflicting pain? Okay, so my question is, how do we keep people from inflicting pain and pepper spraying, seated protesters unnecessarily? And that's my concern, is how do we keep that level? This person was just considered a rogue officer, although it's interesting, he's a lieutenant. He was paid $105,000 a year for the previous 3 years that he was there. The department, his police department, found him not guilty of any wrongdoing. This little activity was completely in policy, and but the university fired him anyway for this. They paid the students $30,000 apiece for having been sprayed, and then he went after he got fired and got a judge to give him a workers' comp claim of $38,000 for pain and psychological pain and suffering. So my question is, how do we keep this kind of thing from happening? And I think the policy is reasonably good, but somehow it just doesn't strike me as capable of eliminating this kind of a problem.
What year?
What's that?
What year?
This was during the Occupy stuff, I would say around Christmas of 2011.
Well, that's a complicated question. I've got to ask you to take it on faith that something like that I don't think would happen. We have a really well-crafted policy. We have a very in-depth, comprehensive, scenario-based use of force training that occurs. The department will do everything it can to make sure things like that don't happen, because that's probably not consistent with his training, if there was any at the time, but it certainly is not consistent with anything in our training. So while the department can't regulate the rogue actions of every single person, we certainly have all the stopgaps to keep something like that from happening. The crowd control team, the only reason I know this is because I supervise it, but we had training on this. There was a similar occurrence that involved pepper spray, and I think it was the late 80s in a Northern California community, Humboldt County maybe. Yeah, they basically chained themselves. Yeah, it was the Q-tip, the OC spray Q-tip in the eyes. So I bring that to your attention only because we incorporate that type of stuff into our training, because we don't want that stuff to happen either. We don't like any bad press any more than the next guy.
Edward?
I'm going to beg you as the maker of the motion to let my suggestion about emergency vehicles into this policy, but that's up to you and your second. The only other thing I had to say is partly to Joe's concern about what actually in this whole policy makes the public safer, and I think there's a ton in here that makes the public safer. Both the public that is not demonstrating and the public that is demonstrating. But I think it's worth noting that there's kind of a safety net to ensure that these policies get followed. It's called YouTube and smartphones and the internet. And is to say the public is to a great degree part of the safety net on this. They are documenting, you bet, every instance of how this plays out. So if there are failures in this policy, God knows there'll be plenty of evidence to point at where it is and how to fix it. If there are failures in training or officer performance, again, the public's going to let us know about it. So that may not be reassuring to anybody in this room, but it's a fact. And I'm thinking that between this very exhaustive policy and the fact that the public is looking out to make sure that there are not egregious violations of this sort of thing, I think we're in pretty good shape. And I encourage us to move forward on this.
I don't have a druthers either way on adding that language, but if you have some specific language you add, I have no problem with making an amendment to the motion. Do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, we could just go with this bad little phrase I came up with, which is to tack on the end of, but as a public safety emergency, comma, particularly with regard to emergency vehicle access, period.
Okay, making that as an amendment, that a second to that?
I'll second it.
Jim, okay. So
Jim.
we have an amendment and a second. And I'm going to take the last two people in the queue here, and then we're going to cut off debate so we can keep the time going. Scott and then Jim.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat it, just so I can catch up?
Sure.
The exact phrase?
Yeah.
At the end of, where are we? Disobedient group, comma, but as a public safety emergency, comma, particularly with regard to emergency vehicle access, period.
Okay.
Add that on the end of that sentence.
Thank you. Sorry. Just one.
Thank you. Okay, Scott and then Jim.
I guess I have a question on Edward's
You want to say something?
addition to the document there, and that's my only concern, and I don't know if I heard you right, so I just want to be clear on this. If I don't want anybody to read that and think that it's okay to maybe block the traffic as long as it's not an emergency vehicle, knowing that we could have traffic backed up for miles, and that's still impeding emergency traffic before they arrive at that point.
Yes, it is.
So I just want, I don't know if that makes it a little more murky for someone that might, I don't know if I heard that right.
Should I answer this or wait my turn?
Well, let's wait. We'll have, I guess we'll have you as the maker to respond to it. But let's get the rest of, the chief has something he wants to
The only thing, this is just in response to what you were mentioning, Joe. It's not in 404.5, but in 404.6, subsection C, there's direction about how OC spray can and can't be used. And I suppose that if you wanted, if the commission wanted to, they could move that language or somehow make that language apply to civil disobedience also. It's interesting that it applies in a more violent setting, but not in civil disobedience. And I don't know exactly what high-volume OC spray delivery is. It might be what's in that picture there.
Yeah.
So you could just take
It's like the big, 6-foot-long pepper foggers that they used in the 60s.
Yeah.
Just fog a whole
All
block.
right, let's keep to the queue now. Then, are you finished?
Yes.
Jim, you had, and then I'll ask.
I was just going to ask, isn't the use of pepper spray already included in the use of force? So you'd still follow everything that was listed in there would pertain in here too?
There's a use of force policy, there's a policy specific to oleous resin capsicum.
Okay, so there's that.
And use of force always applies. It's always, regardless of what I'm doing, whether I'm driving or dispersing a crowd, I always have to live with my actions in light of the use of force policy.
So
Always.
aren't there restrictions there as far as using it in people that are just sitting, like the pictures?
Yeah, I don't have 303 in front of me, but I mean, it's, yeah, the chief pointed out, it's enumerated right here.
And it is in here too, yes.
And I don't have 303 in front of me, but I could look it up, and I'm pretty confident. I mean, it's a policy about OC spray, so it probably says when we can and when we can't. So while I can't say for sure, I'm pretty darn confident that it does.
And the other comment I had was, no matter what we put in policy, no matter what we say, there is nothing to stop anybody from violating that policy. If they make a conscious decision to do so, there is nothing to stop them from doing it. We can, say, don't do this, but there's nothing we can do to stop them from doing it. Just that then at that point, there's discipline for those actions. But there is nothing, no matter how much training we do, no matter how much, if they want to do it, if they want to violate any policy in here, they can do it. So there's nothing we could do to stop that officer from spraying all those people here in Eugene. There's nothing to stop any officer from walking down the line and doing that. There's nothing we could do to stop that. Completely doing away with pepper spray, maybe, but even then, he could possibly get his own, or her own, I guess. But then we've just set up, hopefully we have, and it looks like we have the policies in place, that would be a disciplinary action that would have to follow afterwards. Yeah.
Okay.
That's all I had.
All right, thank you, Jim. Then we're done with the Q, so Edward, for your explanation of that particular additional words.
The reason I didn't just go to, with regard to emergency vehicle access, is exactly your point. I wanted to sort of give them some wiggle room there. It's like, yeah, this is an ambulance alley, say Ferry Street Bridge or 29th. That's a higher priority to clear people out of that rapidly than, say, the intersection of West 27th and Friendly. That puts the officer or the incident commander making a certain amount of judgment decision there about emergency vehicle access. But I think this is a considerably more, I hate to say palatable, but something the public could understand. Why are you moving us out of this street? You know, we're not doing anything to anybody. It's like, yeah, ambulances come through here, fire trucks come through here. You could kill somebody sitting there just by sitting there. So I think that's an important point to make, but I'm not willing to hold up the whole evening to do it.
Okay.
I see.
We're going to go ahead and vote on the amendment first and the motion. Everybody understands the amendment, the language, Edward's just explained it. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in favor. All opposed? Okay.
Thank you, Will.
7, 1 abstention. The second part is the motion itself, and everybody's heard the motion to approve the policy as with the changes presented here tonight on that. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. All opposed? Unanimous. All right, we're going to take a break. Back in 10 minutes, please. 7:13.
Yes, it is.
The camera will be on during the break.
So you moved? Yeah. Well, enjoy your new place outside the city limits.
Yeah, it's been good so far.
This flight is still going to campus?
Yeah, we were already driving it across town. The drive is actually a little bit shorter from where we are now.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Moving on train song.
What?
Moving on a train song?
Yeah, we're out on Camp Creek Road.
That's quite a distance, quite a change.
Just the other side. Like the amount of time to get to downtown is not much more. I mean, at least to Camas Ridge.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Downtown, it's quite a bit
Downtown
more.
would be
I was 5 minutes away from my office before, and now it's 20. It's huge. And I'm noticing the gas. I used to live in the country, and I was spoiled by, I don't know, tanks lasting 2 weeks or more.
I'm in denial, you know. I'm sitting here, you're going,
That poor woman.
We got it.
Yeah, I didn't.
How many meetings is she going to that have nothing to do with being able to help the problem? Oh my God.
That's what I'm being told.
Yeah, I remember when I could see you figured it out, it was fun, but oh well. You know,
I know, I'm still in that denial phase.
You're in the line of fire.
My thinking is
So instead of.
we have huge amounts of money going into from corporate America, going into right manufacturing.
Turned out to be a really good combination of neighborhood association. Simply my neighbors, people from the Human Rights Commission, this commission.
Well, it was the
Whole mess of political candidates and campaign
voices potentially merged.
It was nice to have people coming and paying all the way for their birthday.
That's what's
Working really hard for them.
anonymous complaining.
You know, in that recording thing for the CRB, but you know, if the complainant or the officer asks for it to be recorded, I think they probably should. You know, even if it makes them feel less comfortable discussing things. But I was like, absent that, I am sympathetic to the substantial administrative burden of archiving all of this stuff forever.
Really do the best job.
So I don't know. It is interesting. I think Mark Gissner is.
But
I think the conversation, it feels like the conversations are honest and forthright when it's not recorded. But transparency issue is a big deal.
What I was afraid of here is things staring at us all the time. It felt less free to talk. Like it would change the conversation. That might be the idea.
Stuff like this, I suppose they don't want to.
Exactly.
It is interesting. It is sort of another, it's almost a seat at the table, like, okay, now how am I going to react to this?
the fastest way to,
I mean,
well, it's the first 5 books.
I wasn't going to say anything, and I was like, oh crap, I better say
No,
something.
I agree with you.
But I don't, you know, in terms of the dynamic of the group, I didn't see much purpose in saying anything, but
Looking at my work.
it's recorded, so I thought it. I mean, that's all my friends, what would they say if they saw it?
On my side right now. I mean, there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
It does play a role, you know.
But it's not going to be until like next May.
But it is a city that's sort of rooted in conspiracy theories, so to the extent that it
Somewhere in that whole mix, they're going to make it
deflates those.
all those marijuana dealers to put money in your bank.
I sort of thought about it at great length.
So you're doing criminal defense?
Yeah.
Mostly municipal or circuit?
Mostly there. Yeah. I do appointed work in the municipal court, and then I work for the UO Legal Services.
Oh, do you?
So most of those kids get cited in municipal. Yeah, I've done there a lot.
Yeah.
And retained work.
That was interesting when they were.
With good and bad results. There's going to be children and pets.
The lack of civilian oversight of the UOPD
More
is
high people on the road.
disturbing.
And when Lloyd Brzezinski finally let that through,
It just struck me that
the oversight was like, he said, there's got to be oversight. I'll let this
rather
bill
than
through.
there is,
No. And, you know,
You had your 15 minutes in the paper this morning, so I've got a few minutes.
oh.
Did you see it? Did you see him in the paper on the front page? Front page.
Everything from
Yeah.
I read it online, so
Yeah, he was
it's not always the same.
He was in the picture, standing there, tall, up there with the veterans.
Yeah.
Thanks for going.
Oh, yeah.
Very nice.
I have a newspaper.
I want to get that. There are some.
yeah.
Oh, about hiring?
Last, I don't remember.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you go.
I'm a new guy, so I'm not sure what you have on your work plan.
Pick up the paper over
No, it's just great. And then I
Nothing to say. Nothing to say. You're not sitting there at about 11 o'clock.
About May 11th.
Oh, yeah.
1972. Literally,
Oh, yeah, the hiring stuff. Yeah, that's right.
is my understanding that
No, I just thought, you know, like, you know what it was is I read Joe Dominic is a guy who wrote a book called Blue. It's about Bill Bragg.
there's actually stuff in it.
Changes, and I
The
thought,
deck is the official administration paper.
you know, I mean, I trust this chief a lot. You know, I think he's great, but I don't know about the next guy. So, you know, so getting him to put it down on paper, what he thinks makes a good officer, and put in a policy. The next chief can change that policy if he wants, but then there's at least a public discussion about, hey, you know, this is what we think we should get in our business.
But Thursday and Tech Talk,
Particularly with people like,
and this one has, there's like 4 or 5 issues of stuff about this. Because they have to justify, I think those the Institute of Cancel Finals.
What are you afraid they're going to fine $80,000 a day right after that?
But the interesting thing, no, my experience here is, this is just a small piece, this is just one violence. The actual bigger violence began on the Boston.
Well, you know, I get to see him on the guard a lot too. You know, like, hey, I got a great guy for you. You know, he's been with us for 10 years, and he'd really work well for you.
Well, you don't want to
And he kind of goes,
an Apple store.
10 years like, why is he coming my way? You know, sometimes it's a good reason, but a lot of times it's like, well, you know, he's just looking for something new.
The Apple store.
Right. Turkey farm.
In fact, that was part of their wedding.
No, it was funny when I was in Afghanistan. There were a
DoD civilian. Big civilian workforce.
Why would you think we?
You know, there were some really good ones. And then there were some that
They described as the
they got promotions to come here, and their old agencies didn't want to come want them back, and so they'd be there for like half of 4 years. They were all just like waiting for the management to change over so they could potentially get a job back. Yeah, they've been 14 years, 15, so they got a 15, and 15 in a deployed environment. It's really nice pay.
Quite a
You know,
period.
it's going back to being, 14 back in
There's
DC,
essentially
and it
no
was
historic
nice.
record of any of that stuff.
That was sort of funny, but yeah, you're like, oh, okay.
All right, well, thanks for bringing that up.
No, we'll do it. See how it goes. It's just easy for me to say. I don't have to write it.
He and I
All right,
talked about this.
let's go back to the meeting. Everybody can come back to the table.
Whatever.
Okay, next item in the, on our agenda is the chief's report. Chief's presentation.
Sorry about that.
Didn't mean to catch you short. Everybody has it in their packet. And, if you wanna go and hit the
Sure, I'll
highlights,
go over a
John.
few things that
Yeah,
may not seem
yeah.
obvious. Under the chief's activities, the first item, the BetNet meeting, is a monthly meeting that's held at the VA offices in the federal building, where service providers get together along with VA personnel and talk about common things that they're working on, and it's a chance for them to network about a lot of things, including the different veterans that they're helping with. And then the second item, this is the consultants that we hired to help with our 911 center. We're looking for efficiencies, retention, an improved policy packet, and they came in, they're providing us with some recommendations.
What does the ESCI stand?
Emergency Services Communication Incorporated, maybe? Yeah.
Okay.
And then the City Club, House Bill 2002, you're going to hear more about that later. But this is the profiling bill that passed last year. So Dave Bedanke, who is the retired director of the Oregon ACLU, and I spoke together at the City Club. Let's see. Otherwise, I think it's all pretty self-explanatory, and I'm happy to answer any questions. We added downtown control charts in this one. The reason for that is that there's a lot of discussion about travelers downtown and the effect on the atmosphere there. There is, you'll see from the control charts, there are more calls for service, there's more officer activity in the last 3 years, 2 years, 2 full years downtown.
Jim?
Well, you answered one of my questions about ESCI, and I wasn't really quite sure what was going on there, but that explains it. The call center being temporarily down, the 911 center, do you know what caused that?
What caused the staffing?
Yeah,
You know, by design, not by design, not by intent, but even if we were fully staffed, there aren't enough employees to fill all the shifts. So we have drafts and overtime just in order to fill a basic shift. And so anytime, there's only 45 employees out there, so anytime you have a vacancy, it exacerbates that problem, because there's nobody else in the 320-member department who can go in there and do that work. It's limited to just those few 45 people. Another vacancy, it takes 6.5 employees to staff a 24/7 position. So anytime you subtract one employee, the problem of overtime grows worse and worse. So It's a job where for 10 hours with only a few breaks, a person sits in a chair and takes a pretty intense 911 call. So it's demanding, it's a fascinating job. The people who work in there enjoy it, but to do it without a lot of breaks for 4 10-hour days, and then often to be drafted, forced to work overtime, makes it difficult to keep some people who didn't realize the work would be quite like that. And then the training is very rigorous. The job has become more and more sophisticated over time. The expectations are a lot more difficult to meet. And so we lose quite a few people in the training period, in their 18-month probationary period. And it's a common, retention is one of the problems that all 911 centers have. Some have less of a problem there than others, and so we want to learn everything we can from them.
And I guess maybe I was misreading that, because when I was reading 911 temporarily down, I was thinking that the whole system was down.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. I didn't know which
that's what
page you were on. But no, the 911 center was temporarily down.
Yeah.
There's road work on for the MX system on 6th Avenue there, and somebody cut one of the cables that provided services to our 911 center. So we're pretty good at this. The center immediately launched 911 call takers, emergency call takers, to our backup center, which is in the Lane County Sheriff's Office. So we put 3 call takers in there to take all 911 lines. They're transferred by the flip of a switch.
So that's your DR site, basically? Your disaster recovery site? That's kind of where...
Yeah, that's where we go for 911 center anyway.
That's a good deal. And my last question was, I saw the UEMBs had gone up so far this year by 433 incidents, which is a over 26% increase. Do you have
I don't know the explanation for that.
Okay.
Sometimes it means that a couple people are not in prison, were released, or...
That's a big increase, a big...
Yeah. It can also be... What page are you on?
That was on page 7.
It can also be change in reporting, if confidence in reporting is higher, people get a higher report rate.
Okay, thank you.
I had Edward next.
Chief, I'm looking at these top arrestees, frequent flyers, I would imagine. And I think I brought this up here at the commission before, and you probably even answered this before, but I'm getting old and forgetful. I know that some cities have a multi-department approach to people who are both frequent criminal contacts and often also frequent paramedic contacts or emergency room stays and so on. And often cities find that it's a tiny, tiny number of people. In San Francisco, it was 50 or 60 people out of 750,000 that were using up this disproportionate amount of time and money. And they actually put social service agencies and counseling and so on thrown at these people in particular in an effort to reduce this revolving door. Does Eugene have something like that, and have you told me this already?
Yeah, we talk about this all the time, and the reason I keep this slide on our bi-weekly DLP presentation as senior staff is so that we're constantly trying to think about how not to have these folks on here. If you could see the names, you'd see it's a lot of the same people
I get that.
every month. So there is a growing awareness in the mental health treatment community and in Peace Health's emergency services system, emergency room or emergency department system, our EMS systems, Eugene Springfield Fire Department, our police department, of exactly who these folks, and the municipal court, of exactly who these folks are and why we keep arresting them, why the medics have to keep picking them up, why emergency rooms are treating them, why they're in and out of the Buckley House, and on and on. And probably the most, the solution that's getting the most attention right now is the Housing First.
Sure.
So that's kind of what we're looking at now. Apart from that, we're just moving the deck chairs.
Yeah, I know.
There isn't great jail space to put them in, or appropriate jail space.
Yeah.
and there isn't great mental health treatment to
Right,
house them in.
And I'm looking at the age of some of these people, and
Yes.
it looks like they've been doing probably the same thing for 40 years or more.
Exactly.
Impacting that is not easy.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Questions? Martin?
Just on the downtown map, I certainly have been trying to talk up the desirability of doing something with Kesey Square, whether it be developing it as open space or putting a building there or whatever. It seems to be much discussed, but rarely in the context of the sort of police problems there. And I think actually it's a sad conflation of the homelessness and the criminality, when in fact I think the homeless are much more likely to be victims of criminality. So, I mean, to the extent there's some public messaging about, hey, look, this is a problem area, and we would like, we can inform the conversation about ways that might change, given various proposals. Obviously, you're not the architecture review committee, but like I said, it tends to be a public safety problem without necessarily a public safety solution.
Right. That's exactly right. And it's nice that someone else is seeing it as a problem and looking for different solutions.
Yeah.
Because law enforcement is not going to change alone the situation. I'd like to get back to Jim's question on the UUV. It was, at this time last year, there were 451 stolen cars. And this year, it's 463, so it's only gone up a little bit. 2.7%.
No, I was at the UE.
Unlawful entry.
The unlawful entry.
Oh, UEMVs, you mean a decline in that?
No,
It's gone down by 433.
I'm sorry, you're right. It has gone down.
Oh, okay.
I was actually reading that incorrectly. It's going up.
I wish I could say with confidence that was because we're doing such a great job, but sometimes these numbers change because people don't think there's any point in calling. That's true. But the
I guess I should be
increase-
complimenting you and saying, good job, or
Yeah,
something as
hard
far
to
as...
know. You don't want to
slowing it
assume
down.
too much ownership in the change in numbers, but it does look like this kind of crime that we have listed here has trended down since the jail has started to open more beds. It has had that effect.
Okay, any other questions? Now we'll move on to Chief Commission's vacancy. Back in, we have had, at the bottom, you'll see in addition to explaining the way we recommended people last time. And many of you have heard in the mailing, Jesse has moved out of the city, and he has elected not to remain on the commission, but has agreed to stay until we get a replacement. Thank you for that, because wouldn't have had a quorum tonight if you weren't here, so that's good. We have the people before you. How do the commissioners feel about the last time we weighted the questions and then put everybody, according to, recommended them rather according to their weight in the interviews, and obviously two of the people with the highest scores are now Scott and Marshall on our commission. So we have one other person in that category, Terry Robertson. If it's your wish, I will send a letter to Mayor Piercy indicating that we would recommend him for the vacancy, or would you prefer not to recommend him and recommend someone else, whatever you choose. Joe?
Actually, it's a her.
It's a her?
Yep.
Okay.
And as one of the people who was on that committee, I'm one of the people who recommended her highly, and I still do. We had a first pass for people, and she came, and I thought she was very good, but did not get an offer. And then the second time, she also came and apparently did not get chosen. And the group, in my opinion, liked her both times. So I would say that she's quite good. Very, very sharp, and I think would make a very good commissioner.
Okay, you have a motion to that effect?
Yeah, I would love to see her join the commission.
Okay, so
So moved.
moving that we recommend Terry Robertson for the vacancy. We have a second to that.
I'll second it.
Jim seconding it. Jim, you're doing this, right? Sorry, I keep forgetting. You don't know names. Okay, so any discussion on that? Whether we should interview this person? No. We have Jim, go ahead.
Is there anything that, I guess since it's a midterm appointment, I guess, do they still have to go through the application process? What are the city?
Correct, yeah, everything, what
So,
we
but
got,
will-
I'm
but
sorry,
will she-
my bad, I did not, I forgot, I left one piece out. Carter checked with, if she was here tonight, she would have corrected me. Carter checked with the legal staff at city manager's office, and the list is still active according to the rules of
Okay.
appointing commissions. They're allowed to continue to use this for a period of time. In April 2014 was when we sent the letter through, so it's still active, and they would be happy to take a recommendation from us, so I'm sure.
That's why I want to make sure that we weren't violating any
Right,
of the
exactly.
city
My
policy.
bad, I
rules.
forgot to mention.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Does anybody, since I was on this, in this batch, does anybody recall what her interest was? Just public service, or does she have some connection to the police?
I don't have access to her application, so I couldn't tell you what she said.
As I remember, it was mostly just interest in the community. She had been involved in other things, community activities before, and I don't know that she had any particular axe to grind. Didn't detect that during the interviews, and I just thought she was very competent.
Sounds good to me.
Just like her scores. We don't actually get to vote on applicants usually, so.
Sounds fine to me.
Okay, yeah, it's still up to the mayor
The mayor.
and council to make the appointment. We just make a recommendation, that's all we'll be doing. So, having heard no further discussion on it, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. All opposed? It's unanimous. Okay, thank you. Next item.
Yeah, what is that?
Yeah, professional stops data program. So I guess, Chief, are you going to give us that, or?
Sure. Nobody else was planning. Okay, the status of this is that the pilot, well, first of all, I'll give a little bit of a recap. About a year and a half ago, the police commission finalized a policy, which you see here in the packet. A committee of community members that we pulled together helped establish the data points, which is in not the published version, but the version that our pilot officers are using. And that was recognized by the Governor's Law Enforcement Contacts Commission as a good model to use. We hoped that about a year ago we would have had the pilot started with the records management system that went online for us in November of 2013, but the vendor has been incapable of making that module in that records management system available to us for this purpose. So the police auditor, Mark Gissner, came to us with a pretty good idea. He suggested that we develop some kind of app for an iPhone or a smartphone where we could introduce all the data points and start to collect data that way in a much simpler format. We went to the Information Services Division of in the city was not able to put something like that together for us. Public Works has an IT guy that built this app for us, and it's usable. So we rolled that out I think they received their training last week. The officers did. I suspect they'll start using it and applying the policy in the next week or so. There's a dozen officers. And the whole point of the pilot isn't to determine whether the officers are exhibiting any racial bias or any bias based on the people in the data set. but to exercise the entire process. So we'll do this for 6 months. We'll make an assessment of what they learned from the use of it. And we'll take an early look at the data. We'll modify policy if we have to, or the practices of collecting the data. And then at the end of the year, we'll have the Portland State University's evaluation or assessment methods used with the data that we have. We'll see if we're content with how the assessment is done. And then we'll see if we're ready to roll it out to the rest of the department. Between now and then, we may, the vendor may have the module ready with our records management system. If they do, we'll probably experiment with that one also. That's where we are.
Well, great, it's good. I'm sorry we couldn't get the Sun people, whatever their name is.
SunGuard, yeah.
To get a module on that, but that was a long time trying to figure that out. I'm glad that somebody came up with something that works real easy, and I hope it doesn't have too much work for the officers. Any questions for the chief and or discussion on this?
One last thing I'll add, since you all put so much work into development of the policy, is that House Bill 2002 passed then this last year, and we have until January 1st to adopt the new definition of profiling. So we'll do that. Our definition is a little broader, but it doesn't include all these different factors that are listed in the statute. So
That was my question.
once we do that, we'll be in compliance with the law.
I got Jesse, okay.
When the draft policy got adopted, the idea was it was going to be reviewed again in about a year. I just want to put out to, as I'm getting off the commission, and it's a whole lot of new people, to make sure that this gets looked at again. There was a lot of discussion about whether it was going to be the right thing. It needed to be looked at, reviewed. I mean, I'm sure it will. This is kind of turned into a hot topic with the House bill and the recent City Club. That's all.
Thank you, Jim.
I think the chief pretty much answered my questions that I had on 202, all the things, or 2002, all the things that had to be included there, especially in section, I was kind of marking through the things in section 2 that, I don't know if we've got that policy in place, I don't know if we've got that in place, but it sounds like you've got probably somebody working on it.
We will have it in place by January 1st.
It's not, I know it's not a lot of time, and of course, when did this pass? Not very long ago, I don't think.
Really, the only thing we need to change in our policy is the factors, to make sure the factors are all included in our list.
Yeah.
Well,
And I thought some of the procedures for investigating, submitting a copy, of each profiling complaint, I don't know if all those places are, if all that's in place either.
It is.
And has to be, by telephone anonymously or through a third party, all those things are already in place?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, that's not our responsibility, that's the LECC's. And they do
Okay.
that.
So they're the ones that have to put that in place, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I know that I looked at this policy, this bill, when I saw it, and I really thought it was thoroughly done. It covers everything. I mean, it seems to me, even probably tribal officers and every police officer in Oregon, pretty much any constable, anyone that works there, and the definition. I tried to imagine someone who would not be covered by profiling, and I can't, because it covers every person in Oregon, from what I can see. There's no category that I can see on here that wouldn't cover everyone. So to me, it's a good policy. It covers everyone, and it means everyone, for any reason, is I guess, singled out based on one of these characters, then something's not right. But, we're glad to see that, and glad to see the stops data, and we're sure that we'll find that Eugene is a leader in keeping those statistics. Since we were, as the chief said, they used your model as an example of what they'd like to see done. So I think it's great that we're going to have this. We don't need to take any action today. We'll be looking forward to further reports as they come in from the chief. I hope you can provide us with that.
Yes.
Okay. So having said that, we'll move along. And does anybody have any other questions here? Not. Closing comments?
Just,
Jim, you had a
no,
question?
it wasn't a closing comment, but I wanted to ask, I wasn't quite understanding why we had the other two policies in our,
I don't know, Carter.
there's professional police contacts and oath of office, so I wasn't quite sure why we had those. And they were on the agenda, but they were in our information.
I
so-
think maybe it had something to do with the code of conduct, the code of conduct and the oath of office and things like that, having to do with the discipline policy perhaps, and maybe somebody had questions about the police officers taking oaths and, office and what their requirements are and their duties, and so maybe that was just put in there for reference, and
So I
without
didn't
Carter
have-
here, I couldn't say.
I didn't know if there was something we were going to look at coming up, but I actually had some questions on oath of office.
I mean, if you'd like to suggest that, I can get it in the agenda, or...
You want to make more work for us?
No, it doesn't have to. I just thought it was going to be, so that's why I just started making some notes on it to bring up to ask questions about it. Okay.
Okay, so closing comments, I guess I'll start off tonight. Two things. I want to welcome Sergeant Williams to help us, guide us through these policy discussions. I appreciate your service and the fact that you're going to be helping us do that. Thank you very much for offering to do so.
I'm looking forward to the opportunity. It'll certainly be a new experience for me and a new challenge, so bear with me. Hold my hand for a while.
We'll try to be kinder to you than we are to Matt.
Yeah, maybe at least for a few months.
Exactly. He had hair when you started.
And speaking of Matt, I'd like to take a moment to commend Matt for his work here. He's actually been very patient with all of us who had questions and didn't understand policy, and he's patiently explained everything to us. So your tolerance to that is very much appreciated. But also like to take a moment to commend you for what you did on Veterans Day yesterday. Just organizing, maybe some of you don't know, but Matt organized an event at Federal Building Plaza where he actually read all the names of the veterans, their name and rank, that served over in the Gulf War, that were killed over in the Gulf War and Iraq and Operation, post 9/11. Thank you for clarifying. So it was a great effort, and it was all day long, and I saw the chief participated in that on the news. So thank you for being there for those of you who did help with that. And please see that the others are thanked too, because it's an important thing that you did. We appreciate it very much. And I thank you all for coming out tonight, because we just barely made it to an official quorum, and it is rainy, and it would have been nice to stay home and watch Thursday night football rather. What the heck? Thank you for being here. So if anybody else has any other comments, Bill?
Well, I also want to thank Sergeant Lowen, who did a wonderful job over the last year with answering our many questions, which I think sometimes were sort of off topic or very basic, that was easy. And I want to welcome Sergeant Williams. I appreciate it. There was a rumor I heard that you volunteered for this position, and I appreciate the enthusiasm, and hopefully it'll keep up for the time that you work with us. So
Probably just a rumor.
And also want to thank Matt for what he did yesterday. I got to go over there at the federal courthouse a couple times yesterday to listen to the names, and it was a great job. And Commissioner Nowicki spent 20 minutes reading names too during the day, and so I appreciate him and everybody else that did that. That was great. That was a lot of work on your part, but that was terrific.
Tim?
I think you raised your hand before.
Okay, go ahead.
Just looking at the use of deadly force review board findings and recommendations, I assume those recommendations will come back in a policy amendment if there is one here.
Yes.
Okay.
Are you talking about my memo to city manager?
Well, I saw that there was the use of deadly force review board, that they had some recommendations about policy in terms of merging two things. Anyway, I guess the larger thing is, I think it's probably a wise thing to separate your police commission from your civilian review board. Not every city does it, and some combine them. But what it would be good to see is sort of the backside of that in terms of their recommendations, not necessarily by individual officers, but to the extent that they see gaps in policies or things that should be covered or things that weren't covered quite right in terms of a practical impact. It would be good to sort of close that loop. And we can do that in this forum without necessarily discussing the fault of any particular officer in the circumstance. So I would like to work as a body to sort of close that loop and say, okay, let's make this a continuous process so that it doesn't feel necessarily bad to an officer to say, well, now because of me, they got to redo the whole policy. It's just something we do continuously, even if the officer's found in policy. To say, okay, look, it was in policy, but these issues came up. We should look at this. Do we want to fix it? Is there something that doesn't need to be fixed? Do we not want to change anything because we thought it was good? And at least in terms of major events. So, my thought.
Matt, thank you for your time. I probably won't be seeing you much now, except maybe at Fred Meyer.
Yeah, I'll be back. I have 2 sons, so they get a lot.
So you'll be our next one?
I'll be in December. You're not quite ready
Not quite,
yet,
but-
so.
Well, thanks for all your time and putting up with a bunch of us that don't, having to explain police lingo to us citizens, civilians, or community members. And welcome, Sergeant Williams. Hopefully you'll keep your hair. And we won't cause you to pull it off. And you're walking here, what are those guys talking about? Thank you, and thanks for Jessica and our speakers tonight that came in to talk to us. It's always good to hear from the public. Don't always have that, so thank you.
I read a police report in the last couple of days that really stood out to me. A guy had been in alleged disturbance, and police confronted him, and he allegedly said, "I'm going to take your gun," charged the officer. Officer said, "I'm going to mace you," maced him. The guy said, "It doesn't affect me," came at him further, tased him. Said the taser doesn't affect me. Another officer maced him. As I read through this, I just could not believe the amount of restraint. In the end, the guy got tased, maced, handcuffed, taken away safely. It was great. I read a report, talk to a defendant, something upsets me, but so many times, there's been a couple of those recently where there's just amazing restraint on the part of the officers. That's appreciated. I was going to say that kind of what I do is look for unconstitutional conduct on the part of police. That's how I am able to try to suppress evidence in a lot of cases. There's just not overall all that much of it. This department does a great job. Great command, and I heard Marshall saying this during the break. It's a great command. The police commission, I think, needs to just, going forward, be careful about resting on what this command has, because you don't know what you're going to get in the future. But policies can be changed no matter what is passed today. Yeah.
Just like to say thanks, Sergeant Long, for yesterday as well. Usually get a chance to see how things impact you, but yesterday I arrived right in time to hear one of my flight medics' names called, and I got that chance to visit with some fellow veterans that knew her, and I restated what had occurred in the afternoon, and they were really moved by that. And I think I've been impressed ever since I've been appointed on this commission with the conversations that we've had, and I just continually am impressed. So thank you, Chief, and thank you, officers that read and everybody else that participated. I look forward to next year. Thank you.
So I guess it's my turn. Again, thanks, Matt. I thought you did a great job. I argued against you a whole bunch of times, but it was an excellent job. Thank you.
Anything, Chief? No. Okay, well, thank you again for coming out. We'll see you next month. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.
Bringing that up.
How'd it go, James?
Good. 6 pages of notes. I'm pretty amazed at how he was keeping up. I was totally expecting you to be.
Have you ever observed